Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. We have an interesting video here around NFTs. This is of course a huge topic around a year or 2 years ago. Of course, there's still many holders of NFTs, but not quite to the number that we saw around that period of time. We're looking into a bit more detail about why that is and the structural damage towards the valuation as well as the holding of NFTs in that period of time, but also what the future holds for NFTs. There's obviously a massive space of availability of different kind of solutions and opportunities, and for sure the stats that come in front of us in this video are very surprising indeed. Perhaps maybe not a surprise to some people, but it certainly gives you an indication of exactly what is potentially to come in the years ahead. So guys, before we do this, of course, if you haven't done so already, welcome to the channel. If you're new, don't forget to smash that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and make sure you hit that like button as well if you enjoy this content. As you see on the page here, just a few demonstrations of the different kind of assets, interviews and topics that we discuss on the channel, and I'm looking forward to adding this NFT one to the equation of this conversation as well. So for me personally, I've actually worked within a space, within the blockchain space, around an NFT orientated game, and this for sure was quite an interesting oversight or an overview for me personally getting into that kind of arena. The digital asset application in gaming is very interesting indeed. We'll talk about a few variations and areas or paths that people can go down with NFTs, not just with the ownership, but also how this will change the way we react with our lives or interact with our lives. And also how we interact with things, whether they're physical or digital assets, remains to be very much an open book conversation at the moment in regards to where this can go. So what I'm going to do first of all, guys, we're just going to switch over to the browser quickly. So what we can see here is a couple of renditions of the application of NFT. Now, many of you know, and over the years, that there's been a lot of artwork orientated NFTs. We saw that huge rise in the ape NFTs, for example, the artwork pieces. Whether these were AI generated or someone actually created these from scratch remains to be seen. But the power of these was very much around the orientation of marketing prowess, of course, but the orientation as well that this was a new exciting area of interest in terms of investment. And before we even got into the magnitude of the speed at which these industries and these areas grew, we got to a point where actually companies and brands started getting heavily involved in the NFT space as well. Not always in artwork form. Some went down like the fan token aspects, but in general, you can see there's a few labels here of names, Adidas, Nike, etc., created essentially artwork related trainers or footwear, and people could purchase these and represent these in their own wallets. And you're kind of sometimes sat there going, what does this even mean? Okay, I own a pair of digital trainers that I could potentially use on my own avatar in the near future, or they just sit there and there's no actual kind of realistic point of them actually being in existence. But my mind being very open and on the fence, arguably you could say this was a very big trial period. Whether that's at a brand level or a governmental level, was the fact there was a fascination of hundreds of thousands of people worldwide, globally, simultaneously purchasing things that you can't physically hold. And they just sat in your digital wallet. Some of them created value. Some of them are just sat there awaiting the future development of either a game or a piece of land that you've purchased, or indeed these physical assets, maybe, just maybe some of these digital assets being turned into physical assets and vice versa. So there's a whole spectrum here, guys, of interesting developments that can occur in these coming months and years ahead and decades ahead as well. So the formulation of an NFT, for those that don't know, and I'm not going to do a huge video in relation to what exactly an NFT is, but a very much top line emphasis around this. The fact is the NFT, non-fungible token, is basically something, there's not a ratio of 1-to-1. So for example, if I was to give you a £5 note, irrespective of the fact that it probably holds some debt behind it, but you can't see that debt, of course, we can essentially emphasize the fact that if I give you a £5 note, it's a £5 note. But an NFT is essentially something outside that remit of the 1-to-1 ratio. So it actually has a value to it, something that's outside that equation of the 1-to-1. So it could be pretty much anything you could possibly think of, to be honest. So for in this instance, the digital asset is you've got something created and produced that could actually deliver extra revenue for you, potentially, or yield, or indeed a return on the investment, because it's something that will gain value because it's something that could be potentially in demand in the future. Now, you could argue that in the monetary system, that's why we have maybe interest rates and inflation, etc., because of the balancing act in the economy, elasticity, all that stuff. That's another crazy lecturing topic to come up with one day to present that more detail for sure. But this instance is that what examples we've seen predominantly over the last few years have been around the artwork pieces. Whether they're generated, as I said, digitally or not is another question, but they are there. And it created a response system of people getting excited about this. And the fact that it was new, and the fact that there would be hype marketing. The very clever people, by the way, up the top levels of people who either created these NFTs or were in the mix of the early adopters of NFTs, knew that there would be a marketing push around this globally through influencer marketing, YouTubers, or the fact that brands got involved that would generate money, irrespective of our mindsets of whether is this thing actually legitimate and is this thing actually even worthwhile or not? What's the point in all of this, right? We got things that we can look on a screen, but they have value, which is absolutely crazy mindset to think in that way, right? But that's the world we are in. And when we jump back in to the conversation around the different kind of applications or areas that NFTs could be applicable to, some that I'm just going to reel out off the top of my head right now in sense of like things like gaming. Again, I've been in that industry, but we've now got this ability of brands being able to utilize this, having the adoption of owning things that you can't physically see or touch, but you can have them digitally, and they still have a representative value and potential increase in value of those assets that you hold as well. Now, and which has been on the cards for a long time, to be honest, was the fact of physical NFTs. Some people would call this RWA, real world assets. What do we mean by this? So this aspect of real world asset is pretty much anything that you could kind of think of that would have a monetary value that you could potentially convert into a digital format. And you may be sitting there going, what does that mean? And why do I want to do that as well? So I haven't really got many. Okay, I've got some consoles next to me, like some retro consoles. Ultimately, people don't really pay too much money for those. But let's say there was a rarity of them now. And so therefore, I've got this N64, for example, right next to me. And we're talking about like maybe 20, 30 years time. There's only like 10 of them left in the world. And I've got one of them. And it's sat here on my desk. So I could go and sell that or trade it in, whatever, for whatever currencies we have in the near future. Or I could potentially have this essentially converted. It sounds mental. I could have this potentially converted into a digital asset. And because we have things like KYC, the ability of smart contract, the ability of deeds being able to be transferred back and forth. Remember that point about deeds. We'll talk about that in a minute about real estate, which is fascinating in the NFT space. But essentially, I could say I want 100 people to own this because I want to raise some money for myself. I don't want to get rid of it, but I still want to own a certain percentage of it. So we have, say, 10 people or 100 people invested in this console that I basically... there's various ways you can do it, but ultimately I could take a picture of it, put it on a system, and then therefore legally binding. Again, another point we'll go on to in a minute, because at the moment there's a bit of grey area on this. I could essentially upload this to something like OpenSea or some other NFT marketplace and give the opportunity for people to bid or auction for a share of this, or just open it to everyone and see how many people want a piece of this. But again, why do we want to do this? Because you don't get any benefit from it, because I've got the console here. You're not going to be playing it or this and the other, but you might just be interested in the ownership of it. It's like art. Like some people invest in art. They don't necessarily want the piece of art on their wall, but they know the monetary value of it and the potential of revenue gain from that in the near future. So there's kind of a really random but straightforward example of a possibility of a real world asset or a physical asset potentially being converted into digital. And I only really came very aware of this particular area of interest when I ironically went for an interview with a company. I won't mention them just in case, but they were heavily orientated in physical NFTs or physical assets being converted to digital. I was like, what on earth is this about? Where on earth is this going? And then lo and behold, a year later, I didn't get that job, obviously, but a year later, for my ignorance purposes, the whole market blew up in this sphere. NFTs, I knew of the terminology of an NFT to an extent, but I didn't realize the magnitude of how much hypergrowth could come from the marketing aspect and the hysteria of it. But what it did happen, and I always have a bit of skepticism in me. Sometimes I believe the powers that be do things to have a bit of a trial system on us as people and see our reaction to this. And if it can work on these lower stages of pieces of art or using them to get into events or ticketing systems, whatever, we could magnify this, into extreme levels of investment at an institutional level potentially. So really big pieces of art, or indeed areas of interest such as real estate. This is a huge area, guys. You imagine the property market around the world is absolutely phenomenal. The multi-trillion-dollar market here. And in the instance here in the UK, and I'd really like you to throw your thoughts in on this as well from whatever countries and places you're from. But here in the UK, the process of buying and selling houses is relatively long and sometimes complicated. A lot of back and forth with solicitors, you're paying lots of fees, land registry, which is the proof of the land ownership, all of this kind of stuff, and the orientation of what the valuation of a house. And these will branch off to things of the usage of AI and IoT in the near future. But the real estate property market is massively evolving behind closed doors. There's a lot of really cool companies like Proppy, for example, Hedera, Ripple are getting heavily involved in this area as well. And this is the orientation of an NFT, essentially a house being an NFT, a real world asset, a physical asset being converted in a digital format. And what can we do with this? Well, it means, first of all, we can speed up the entire process because we've got things like KYC, blockchain, AI, all integrated and working together. So we can eliminate potential 3 to 6 month process, sometimes even longer. It's like 9 months. I just moved house and it took a long time. I'm sitting there going, why? Can you just let me do half of this work? I can get it done quickly. But anyway, so the cost association and then obviously the representation of time. And that's why the economy can sometimes be slow in this bubble effect. So if we can start speeding up these processes, not just in property markets, but everywhere else with the digitalization format, i.e. NFTs, it could speed things up significantly. And then we have more time and we have more ability to pay our debtors or have creditors aspects paid off, vice versa, a lot quicker. One of the really interesting examples of the trade finance event that I went to recently, and we did actually mention this on the channel before that event, was around Lloyd's Bank. I think it's like $46 million worth of land over 7 or 8 different investor parties. Now, normally something like that would take years, and this thing took like a few hours. Like crazy, right? That amount of money for a big, massive amount of land with that many people involved, because of smart contracts, KYC, the terminology of validation processing through blockchain, it was done instantly, pretty much. And again, back to that point of how fast things could then move forward. So we've got a real estate situation there, but also when we go back to the investment perspective, this is where it gets interesting. So I believe Proppy can do some form of sharing of aspect of this, but there's a lot of projects and companies out there right now where you can jump on in the comfort of your living room or your bedroom or wherever you are, and you might see a house across the other side of the world, and it's on a marketplace in the crypto exchange or on a NFT marketplace or a real estate marketplace dedicated to the crypto space. And this allows you and other people to accommodate a shared proportion of that real estate property. So because I've got KYC, I've got my wallet connected, all this kind of stuff, I can simply just quickly chuck my money through. All the deeds and everything done simultaneously, very quickly. Obviously, there's some legal boundaries at the moment which are being worked out, but the principle is the fact that people are already doing this. So I could find a property, let's say over the other side of the world in Australia or America, and I can invest some money in it, and I will get the yield of that. Think of it as like a savings account or something like, or if you were just to generally invest in property at commercial level. But there's a huge percentage of people out there, including myself, who don't have the money to be like, I'm going to stick 20 grand in this property over here. I might be able to do a fraction of that, but then start building that pot because I can look at my 5 yield chart for the future and go, okay, in a couple of years' time, I might be able to take some of that money out, put it in another property. That's how property development and owners and asset owners do it, right? It's a long process sometimes for those that don't have significant amounts of money like the rich people do, or how they got their money in the first place. So it opens up the door of accessibility. And this is a very key word that we must demonstrate more when we're talking about this area of interest, accessibility. And I'm just going to throw us back onto the browser quickly, because one of the key points we made in a video a while back, if you remember, or if you're new to the channel, you wouldn't obviously have seen it, but hopefully you get some time to look through this for sure. This was one of the representations of diamonds. Now, I had no idea whatsoever about the magnitude of diamonds. I knew they had value because you go to a store and you go and maybe ask for a diamond ring or a diamond necklace or something, and you get bombarded with obscene amounts of money worth of valuations, right? And especially determining on the carat and the type of gem, the type of diamond, etc., etc. But what I didn't know was a substantial, it was like only 1%. Only 1% of a $1.2 trillion global supply of diamonds is used for investment. 1%. How? So why is this? Why is this? Because a lot of us don't have the knack or the ability in our minds, whatever it might be. I don't. I certainly don't. I don't know where to go. I know where to buy diamonds in a retail store, but to go and invest in diamonds, yeah, I'm sure I could Google some platforms and whatnot. It's similar with gold. Some people I know hold gold, and I say, well, show me your gold then. But they say, well, I don't. I just put money in and it's somewhere else. I was like, right, well, to me, I only deem things based on what I can see. It's not like Christmas, that whole Polar Express film where it's like, you must believe, you can hear the bell, it must be real. But it's like that principle of the fact that I know gold has value, but where are the days of, like, the old cowboy films when you had the gold bars, like, and you go and run around with a sack of them? I know they exist somewhere, but ultimately when you're putting money in over the internet, etc., where is this actual physicality of it? Or like, how do you deem that as a thing? And it's the exact same principle conversation with these kind of things with diamonds. So 1% of that 1.2 trillion market is absolutely phenomenal. But what does this do? It opens the ability of something. I mean, we're moving away from artwork now and all these other areas of assets into something of a magnitude of something that maybe 99% in this instance had no idea that they could share their proportion of assets that they hold. Or at the bare minimum, on the reversal of that, is for me, or someone like me, or many people around the world going, I've always wanted to invest in diamonds, never had the opportunity, but I know crypto, I know how to move money around in crypto, etc., etc. I'm going to do it through this way. And because, again, KYC, blockchain, smart contracts, the deed transfer within that as well, I can hold parts of those diamonds in a fractional way. And it still means I've got that orientation. I have an ability in the near future for that money to accelerate and increase based on the revenue generation, the yield generation. Or a alternative to saving, of course, is the staking mentality. So when we're talking about utility of coins and things and the ability of chains to allow staking, at the end of the day, I'm always the firm believer that money in general is out of thin air. It's a made up system for us to try and have some orientation of level of control and class modules, etc. But that is the world we live in. If aliens came down, they'd probably like, what on earth are you all doing? Maybe they went through that process billions of years ago, but right now this is humanity and what we deal with. So in front of us, we go, okay, well, this is the world. These are now the opportunities ahead of us. These are the opportunities that I couldn't have access to or didn't know how to because of education or whatever it might be. And now we've got a massive batch of opportunity in front of us. So this is where it's taken the evolution and the stepping stones of NFT. As I said, this is not new. It's been around for years, or the conversations around physical assets, digital assets, vice versa. But it's now in fruition. So I wanted to pinpoint something quickly before this as well. The gaming assets are very interesting. Before we go into statistical information, so the gaming information, from my experience personally, this whole ability to own a digital asset within a game is very interesting and very exciting. I'm a gamer. I've got all my consoles here. And I love going to gaming events, etc. So there's a really big, interesting orientation around branding that could potentially happen there. But an in-game asset is a really interesting topic. Can you imagine, like, when you're playing Call of Duty or something, or any game, you don't actually own these items. You pay loads of money for them potentially, and they just sit in the game. But then a new game comes out, or an evolution of that game, or an upgrade, and then you lost all that old stuff. You might take your ratings and rankings and stuff or whatever, but your assets go because they want to make more money. But in this new world of cross-chain mentality in blockchain and the ability to mint assets and essentially potentially melt them, Engine, ENGAIN, was a phenomenal advocate of melting assets, melting NFTs essentially, and converting them into something else. If you've seen the film Ready Player One, it's one of my favorite films. It's the orientation around gaming, but if you actually watch it maybe twice, you start realizing the implication of AI and blockchain in there as well, because this is all the technology behind of how that kind of mentality of a game, or indeed a life in the near future, will perceive to be. So you have a hat or a skin or whatever it is, and you take that with you as an avatar, as a digital entity, a digital ID. That's another topic. You take that with you to whatever game or level that you're going to, as long as it's within what I call gaming law. It doesn't mean like you could take a sword into a football game or something. That'd be a bit mental, right? So there's certain things that you can and cannot do, but the ultimate thing is they are in your portfolio and they belong to you and you own them, and you could sell them, buy them, mint them, change them to something else, whatever it might be. So there's a really interesting digital format. Same with land, digital land. There's no orientation around why do I want to own digital land. The fact of the matter is there will be a massive economy in that area, whether it's a representation of a physical land that's then digitalized, or it's a completely digital area in the VAR. That's VAR. I'm getting obsessed with football VAR. I mean, VR or AR. You see how I got mixed up there. But there's that orientation around there of how interesting that area of opportunity could be as an investment perspective, but also to be able to build on or have your own world and land to operate within. So there's loads of different pockets of information and areas of interest. NFTs can also be applied essentially to tickets, to events side of things. It can be applied to essentially contracts themselves. I know we talk about smart contracts, but the actual document itself can be an NFT. And you think about that from the trade finance perspective, supply chain, etc. This is where I personally don't massively like the NFT terminology anymore. We have to try and start calling it essentially what it is, whether it's that real world asset orientation or the PNFT is kind of phasing out as well. There will come a point where we don't call it an NFT anymore. It just is what it is, and it's in the format that it's in. It's just that at the moment we had to give it a name for people to have something to hone in on and then start to understand, and then businesses and institutional levels start working out how they can work that in their favor. And we as investors or users or early adopters or new people that just want to get involved in investing and somehow have an opportunity to understand and learn this more. So the next generation of people are going to be very much more way up to gear probably than we are, and early adopters beyond me. Like I'm talking about people who've been in blockchain for years and years, way ahead of me. I'm still learning still, of course, despite the diplomas, everything that I've done in the working space of blockchain crypto, including this channel as well. There's much to learn, much to understand. So we've talked about those areas. The one thing I wanted to wrap up on or start to wrap up on is this, and I think this is really interesting. So the statistics, I always love data. I love data. So this is it. In 2021, which is obviously a big area of interest of when NFTs really took off, of course, everyone knows this area very well. You could probably, even without looking at these times in your mind, understand where these were without seeing the labels of them. But the NFT hype grew significantly. So you see back here, even in 2020, this started. Okay, I started blockchain gaming jobs around, I think it was like December 2020, maybe 2021, I can't remember, but it was just before this kind of like big hype movement. So we got into this pattern here of over 1.9 million wallet holders or people who have bought or sold an NFT asset worldwide. And since then, we've had arguably, I would say 80% odd, maybe a bit more, 86% reduction in that number. So we could argue, if this was a nice chart that we would normally see in a crypto asset, as if it was a token in itself, we could argue that we would see a similar pattern across markets in general, and we're already at an 80% drop. So there's an argument to say that we could, as investors, start honing in on the fact that we may have missed the NFT craze before, or is something that we were involved in before and we maybe sold assets and we were jumping back in. The conversations we've had in videos more recently is about the opportunity that we are in right now today. There's a gap. There's a gap before the bull runs kick off, and there's going to be so many different narratives, probably AI related, IoT, ID related, so digital identities. I think NFTs will have a run in some capacity as well as crypto assets in general, of course, CBDC launches, etc., etc. So there's loads to go for in this next bull run, right? And there's going to be a mass audience jumping in. The fact that people can now just, with PayPal, like hundreds of thousands of users worldwide, can now buy and sell crypto. We can do it through our ledgers. We can do it through MetaMask. We can do it online, wherever. More and more people are going to have the digital opportunity to enter these markets. So those that are already holding crypto, thumbs up, fantastic. There will be people that are on the edge right now going, when shall I jump in? And then you're going to get the FOMO people. And we've all been there. I'm not sitting here as saying I'm an expert or like I knew everything straight away. Absolutely not. I came in some of the waves and I took advantage of those waves after learning some bad mistakes at the first time I did it back in 2018 or whenever it was. So this is all coming. So we've seen that statistic number drop down in the trend line. But what I'm interested in is in the future. So again, another representation of what we talk about a lot on the channel is that formulation of what's to come. And why am I interested as an investor? Why would I be interested in NFTs? We've already spoken about this aspect of the different kind of applications that we can look at within NFTs. We have to accommodate that in our heads, that actually the representation of the markets that these potential NFTs can be involved in are in the trillions upon trillions of dollar market. But we're not going to get there overnight. First of all, there's huge things like regulation that need to be adhered to and frameworks to be created. The last trade finance event that I was at, the UK commissioner was talking specifically about it. Sarah Green, fantastic person, great presentation. And they were talking about the frameworks they were developing, particularly around real world assets and how we can legalize things being from a physical asset to digital and vice versa. And how does that actually become common law, of which most common law has been around for centuries, and it needs to be re-examined. I correct me if I'm wrong for anyone that knows the law aspects, but I think one of the orientations around that was that it hasn't been looked at. It was either since the 70s or it was way back in the early 1900s. Either way, it's been a long time since this area of interest around asset ownership and transfer of rights and assets in general has actually been looked at. So this is a huge area of interest, and that's why it wouldn't go to the trillions of dollars immediately. And also, of course, adoption and the utility aspect of it, and people with the education behind how to get involved with it. So irrespective of that, the valuation is quite significant. NFT marketplaces, this is just the marketplaces, guys, not just the actual residual value overall, is set to hit potentially $2.7 billion value in 2025. So this gives us a very interesting perspective that within this period of time, these next few months or whenever it is until the bull cycle trends properly kick in at those beginning stages again, there's an opportunity for us to not just jump into any old NFT or ones that we saw in the past, but an opportunity to think as investors or people that are generally interested in this space about what we want to invest in and why. So for me personally, I'm not interested massively in pieces of art. I'm interested in potential physical assets, particularly like diamonds. That's very interesting. Never had access to that before, and now I have the opportunity to do so through various exchanges and opportunities. I know LCX do something similar. We've seen Hedera's example of diamonds. That's just me talking about one particular area. There's now real estate. You could talk about cars, the valuation of top level cars as well, particularly, collector's items. We've seen some great information and examples from the likes of Ecomi, which is a great project that I followed for a long time. I still hold mine. I think they're on my ledger at the moment under one of the token chains. But they are representing themselves about collectibles, digital assets in a collectible fashion. There's a great channel called Crypto Rain. He follows those guys a lot. Go and check that out. Did quite a few interviews with Crypto Rain in the past in my gaming sphere, and it's really fascinating to see those developments and collectible items, Disney, Pokemon, etc. that will eventually come, and these companies will catch up. And if you want any more examples or evidence of this, just go and look at companies worldwide. Just go on LinkedIn or something and find out if there's a related job around Web3 and NFT application. Disney are doing the same. Warner Brothers have done something similar. Lots of people, or lots of companies, are hiring left, right, and center for the Web3 orientated people and the NFT space. So not only have you got this valuation in the marketplace aspect, that $2.8 billion market valuation in that short period of time, you're looking at the $1 trillion beyond that, but you're also looking at the economy increase as well, the job opportunities. Yes, okay, a lot may be derived around AI in the near future and beyond, but ultimately this will open the door to people that are very interested and open-minded to come into the Web3 space, or maybe have a tenacity in their minds that have an interest in this space, or those companies particularly that want to orientate themselves in this arena. And I think it's fantastic in that area. So there are pros and cons, of course, to NFTs. And of course, people talk about the legalities, the regulation, those will definitely come. But that's why I'm saying in this moment in time, when the markets are quiet, if you haven't done so already, is to start not only just looking at your crypto assets, but if you are looking at holdings or potential holdings of physical real world assets in the digital format, and vice versa, now is the time to research this properly. Don't go with the hype mentality. Go with what you want an interest of investing in, or invest in what you know. That's one of the critical things, and see if there's an opportunity of things that you've always wanted to invest in and never maybe had the chance to in the past. So this is where I think the education is important, and it's not for me ever to say what you should and shouldn't be investing in, but all I can do is give a bit of guidance in the sense of what's potentially out there and some ideologies for your minds as to what maybe to look for and research for yourselves to make your own decisions on that. But there is a time frame, guys, for sure. That's a factual aspect of the sense that there is a short period of time. No one knows the exact timing of when the bull cycles will potentially start within 2024, 2025, if at all, who knows. But that's my orientation around that period of time. And I think now or never is a great time to start learning. Doesn't mean jump in straight away. It means research, think, and then plan a strategy ahead. And make sure as well that you don't go too crazy in the sense you think you'll be a millionaire overnight. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes it can, depending on how much you put in or how lucky you are with picking something, or it might be down to great research. But look at things in the short term and the long term as well. It's very important that you do both of those parts of the play, not just in crypto assets, as I said, but in this NFT spectrum as well. And don't just think that it is pieces of art, colorful pieces of art. It is so much more than that. And that is where I think the next evolution will be, is removing from the terminologies of things like the words NFTs. That is what they are. It doesn't mean that 99% of the world need to know what it's called. They just want to know if it works or how they can get involved. So guys, that's a bit of a wrap up around NFTs. I think it's an interesting topic. Let us know in the comments below if you hold any NFTs from before, if it's something you've been considering but perhaps need extra research on. Let us know. I want to know your states of play in that area. Have you had any successes? Have you had any downfalls? I've certainly had some on both of those spectrums. They're always learnings regardless, either way. You never fail to an extent in this space. It's all about learning and making sure you don't make mistakes in the future. And that's why research is important, and strategizing everything is important as well. Thanks for watching, guys. It's a bit longer than I thought it would be. Hopefully you like my posters behind me. I ordered canvases from Temu, that weird new app, because keep bombarding me, and they came up as rolled pieces of paper. So now I've got to find some canvases or some kind of frames to put these in. So at the moment, apologies, but they're stuck on with electric tape. One day they will look professional. But hopefully you like them. I thought they're fun. But I do love the one sat behind me about playing the trades, not your emotions. And that's exactly what we should also be doing with the NFT space. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next topical video. Take care. Bye-bye.